On Larry King Now, with tuition costs and student loan debt reaching record high levels, more and more Americans are questioning the value of a college degree. We welcome a panel of educators and experts to evaluate the state of higher education in America.
Tuition's been rising, the cost of tuition, at 3 times the rate of regular inflation. And as kids and their parents have continued to pay these prices, colleges have really not faced any sort of fallout.
We've ingrained this message that you go to college, but not quite fine-tuned it enough. And I feel like, especially for low-income and first-generation college students, that it's very similar to what we were telling people about buying homes. Buy a home, any home, no matter what home, no matter what the price, and we've got to be more nuanced about that.
One of the great tragedies of this country is that there are whole cohorts of kids who could do well and thrive and do far better in their lives if they got to college, who don't know that. They don't know it because they haven't been told, or worse yet, that there's a conversation going on nationally that's implying to them that it may not be worth it.
Plus, are we a well-educated country?
I think we could be much better educated.
It's a broad question.
Our results on national tests are pretty mediocre, and what we do is, just like in healthcare, our greatest are the greatest in the world, and our average is pretty bad.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Great show today. A recent Gallup poll suggests that more and more Americans are questioning the value of a higher education while college tuition and student loan debt continues to soar. Today, we welcome an esteemed panel of experts and educators to discuss the state of higher education in America and what's being done to reestablish America's long-standing pillars of success. Zakiya Smith is a former White House senior advisor for domestic policy with the focus on higher education and the current strategy director for the Lumina Foundation. Zakiya is also a member of this year's Forbes 30 Under 30 for Education. Anna Kamenetz is NPR's lead education blogger and the author of Generation Debt and DIYU. Gene Chatsky, NBC Today Show financial editor and AARP financial ambassador. And John Sexton, the 15th president in the history of New York University. Thank you all for coming. Some things current. The 46th annual PDK Gallup poll recently unveiled only 44% of Americans believe a college education is important. That's down from 75% 4 years ago. How do you react, John?
I'm sad because we know a college education can be important for many that would have not known it in that poll. And I think one of the great tragedies of this country is that there are whole cohorts of kids who could do well and thrive and do far better in their lives if they got to college, who don't know that. They don't know it because they haven't been told, or worse yet, that there's a conversation going on nationally that's implying to them that it may not be worth it, when in fact the people in the know that it is.
Anya, you contributed to a recent documentary titled Ivory Tower. That film delves into the current state of higher education. You were quoted as saying, higher education has had the privilege for a very long time of being a black box. It created the prestige and this mystique around it, but we've never really examined very closely the ingredients in the box. What did you mean?
Well, educators like John have done such a great job of expanding the prestige of higher education. And this was a project. It took many, many decades for Americans to believe that higher education was this important. But, in the last few years, there's starting to be more questions about, we're paying all this money. There's not always a direct connection to a job. There's a very large percentage of students, not at NYU, but at less prestigious schools, that drop out or leave without a degree. And so maybe we should be a little bit more careful about examining exactly what colleges are doing and the type of business that they're up to.
Zakiya, are parents looking at this differently than kids?
I think parents are very concerned about whether their students are going to be able to get a job after college. But what we know is that going to college is a surer bet to help you get a job than not going to college.
So parents know that or don't know it?
Parents know that. I think parents know that, and
So who's the percentage of these people all questioning?
I think they're questioning it because it's expensive, and it's increasingly expensive. And when somebody starts asking you to pay tens of thousands of dollars, you're going to kind of take a second, look before you shell out the money. And that's natural.
Why do we charge?
We charge because it's expensive to produce. And John can certainly attest to this, but gathering the greatest teachers in the world, providing them with the dollars that they need to do their research and to have the facilities to teach these classes, it is expensive. But the other side of the coin is that there really has, over the past few years, few decades, been very little pushback on tuition inflation. Tuition's been rising, the cost of tuition, at 3 times the rate of regular inflation. And as kids and their parents have continued to pay these prices, colleges have really not faced any sort of fallout.
Is cost the main reason for this change in public opinion?
I don't think it's necessarily all cost. I think it's cost combined with the job market, combined with the fact that kids who have gotten out of school the last half-decade or so have really come out into a very tough job market. They found it difficult not only to get jobs, but to get the sort of jobs that pay them what they thought they were worth. Although we've created a number of jobs since the recession ended to actually bring us back to ground zero, we're not creating college graduate level
By the way,
jobs.
anyone can jump in, John.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
I think we have to be very careful in this conversation. The first thing is this: there's a lot of folks out there that don't have complete information, so they don't know. For example, the Federal Reserve Board has just quantified in constant dollars the cost of not going to college, and the cost is you lose $500,000 in constant dollars. So it's cheaper to go to college than not to go to college with all the loans and everything else. Now, on the issue of cost, which really is price, to provide an extraordinary education, or even a very good one, you need talented teachers in the classroom, and you need to give them the ability to do it. And the fact of the matter is that that cost or price has been going down. The fact of the matter is that in constant dollars, when you consider financial aid that's given, the cost of a higher education is going down, not up.
When you consider financial aid, which
So
they're
only the
gonna have to
wealthy,
pay
only
back,
the
though.
wealthy, Larry. No. Financial aid meaning grants. I mean net price. The wealthy can afford to pay.
Right.
That's not the issue. And the wealthy know, by the way, an NYU education, round numbers, cost $50,000. We live in a city where you and I know people, we all know people, who killed to get their kids into a kindergarten that cost $30,000. Why should it surprise us that a college or university education that's high quality, see, it's all about quality, is going to cost less than double a kindergarten education? The question is how we enable people who can benefit from it to pay for it. That's the real question.
We got a break coming up. We will come back. We've seen such a dramatic increase in college tuition. What does this tell us about the higher education system as a whole? Don't click away. We're back with our outstanding panel, and Anya was going to say something.
Well, just on the point of who is college worth it to? We all say college is worth it. We say the $500,000 premium. That's all great. There are 37 million Americans with some college and no degree in this country, and the average completion rate for a bachelor's degree is only 56% after 6 years. So, there are an awful lot of colleges out there that really aren't doing the job that they're advertising that they're doing. And that is really scrutiny really needs to fall. That's what it means to look inside the black box. It's to say, for the investment that we're putting out, there are colleges out there that basically take your money and say, see you later.
Anya's absolutely right. If you want that $500,000 premium that John was talking about, the value of going to college, you not only have to go, you have to graduate. And it helps. Speaking as a parent who just took her daughter on some college tours, it helps us tremendously if you do it in 4 years, because this idea of kids going 5-6 years just keeps adding to the bottom line.
And the average student doesn't finish in 4 years. They take 5.5 years, I believe, to actually graduate with a bachelor's degree if they graduate at all.
Aren't there some kind of phony colleges, I don't want to name any, in which you get a sort of, you get a
There
a
have
diploma
been,
by mail?
I think John's point about quality is really, really important. We've been pushing the message to go to college, that people say, go to college, any college, no matter what college. And those wealthy people are savvier, and they can kind of look at guidebooks, and they kind of have social networks that tell them this is the type of college that you go to. But a lot of people from, poorer neighborhoods don't have that help. Their parents didn't go to college, they don't know. So if a college tells you, I'm gonna help you get a really good job, they may not be well accredited, they might not have the ability to give you what they're promising. And that's been happening more and more, and the federal government's been trying to crack down on that kind of behavior.
They have criminally?
Absolutely.
Actually, yeah, the CFPB just sued one college for basically lying to students about their job placement rates.
This is a very important point, and it seems you have unanimity on this. We're talking here about value. We're talking about quality. And
get what you pay for.
Well, but
Not always.
Sometimes.
partly that, but not all the time. Not all the time. And the key thing is information. I couldn't agree more with opening the black box. We should get a lot of information out there, but not just the easy to get information like starting salaries after graduation or even percentage of graduation. But there's ways to do other more subtle information that might be more important to a particular child. And then we have to arm the parents and the children with ways to access it. So I favor, for example, having something called Guidance Counselors for America, not just Teach for America, but Guidance Counselors for America, where recent graduates go out into neighborhoods where there isn't the information and arm kids with it. Because NYU wouldn't be right for every student in the country, even if it's exactly right for a particular student. And the same thing is true of Fordham, where I got my degrees, or St. Francis College in Brooklyn, where I was chairman of the religion department. These are great schools for the right people. And then there are other schools that aren't so great. And for people that I'm the chairman of the board of something called the University of the People, which is completely free for kids in abject poverty in sub-Saharan Africa.
Is the high tech, that's a big, big issue in America, and that's so many of these entrepreneurs, and they go out to the West Coast and do they need college, these whiz kids who come up with ideas in a garage and come up with Facebook? Gates quit Harvard.
And Zuckerberg quit.
Yeah.
And they were like, the 2% of people that quit
Exactly.
Harvard.
I mean, we hear about the people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg who quit and go on to make $1 gazillion. We don't hear about the people who quit and don't go on to make $1 gazillion. So I think we have to look at those kind of stories very carefully. But what is clear when you talk about the topic of value is it's no longer enough just to look at the school. You have to look deeper when you're a parent and when you're a prospective student at the major. At the major, you've got to look at what you are interested in studying and whether that will enable you to get a job when you come out, and let the amount of money that you borrow be sort of guided by what your starting salary is likely to be when you come out.
This may be stupid, but I ask it. Who should not go to college?
I've got a great answer for that. The people who have a great passion and a great understanding of what it is they want to do and they want to get started. I would imagine that you fell into that category in some ways.
Well, I had to help support my mother, but I wanted to be in broadcasting, so
In the tech industry, it's a really great example. These development boot camps have sprung up. They have taken in $100 million in tuition in just the last 3 years. And they are posting, we don't know everything about it, but they're posting 98% placement rates at starting salaries of 6 figures. And the reason is that they're offering intensive education in a 12-week time frame to get you started learning the kinds of computer languages that they don't teach in computer science programs.
Does NYU have funds for underprivileged?
Oh, yes, and we have
How many scholarships?
In this year's entering class, 1 out of 5 students came from families that were Pell Grant eligible, more than 1 out of 5, and 39% of the entering class were first in their families to go to college. But it's all about matching. It's exactly what we were just saying. It's about matching. So my mom had 5 siblings. Interestingly, one of the women went to college. The other 4 never did. They all had joyful and fulfilling lives. And my uncles wouldn't have gone to college today. They had joyful and fulfilling lives as carpenters, electricians. This is what they wanted to be. It's their passion. And you don't have to see it as an all or nothing. You talk about that whiz kid, okay, they tried themselves. Call it a gap year. Call it a gap 5 years. I didn't get to law school till I was 33. So, it's not an all or nothing choice, but it is about matching, and that means information and getting it to the people other than the privileged.
After the break, our panelists weigh in on efforts to make college more affordable. Stay with us.
Higher education in America has been very successful for centuries. But now things are changing because the scale and the cost is enormous. We have a product that is so expensive that a lot of people can't pay for it, and they have to go into debt, and it just isn't viable.
The rise in student tuition is unsustainable. We cannot continue to charge significantly more year after year after year without running into some kind of a brick wall.
College tuition has increased more than any other good or service in the entire U.S. economy since 1978.
We're back with our outstanding panel. You just saw a clip from Ivory Tower. That's a documentary on higher education. The clip speaks to the rising costs of tuition. College tuition has increased 1,120% from 1978 to 2010, more than any other good or service in the United States. And at the end of 2013, student loan debt exceeded $1 trillion. How do they pay that back?
Well, most people pay it back, and they pay
do.
it back with jobs that they get because they're college educated. The people who don't pay it back are usually the folks that didn't graduate. And it's a really interesting conundrum that the people with the most debt are actually not the people in default. The people with the least debt are usually the people that are in default on their student loans because they didn't graduate and don't have a college degree to pay it back.
What do we do with that problem?
Well, I suggest a whole lot of things. I think that there needs to be a lot more discipline about tuition increases, particularly at public institutions that are there to serve the public and populations in states. A lot of times, those public institutions are raising their prices because of cuts in state funding. So there's discipline that needs to be imposed all across the board. I think that for student loans, what I would like to see is bankruptcy protection, because I think that students need to be able to write off the results of a terrible mistake. In the case that Zakiev referred to, which Corinthian colleges, you've got a federal government suing these colleges because they've broken their promises to so many students, but those students are still on the hook for the loans that they borrowed to go to that school.
So I think that it's useful to keep in mind that a lot of the problem with student debt is in and around the proprietary sector in places like Corinthian that don't deliver, and exactly in the sector of people that don't get the degree. But I think we have to be very, very careful as we approach this, that we don't press down on quality. That's the one thing. I'm all in favor of efficiencies and keeping costs as low as possible. In fact, I want to, so I can attract more students, because the students are very tuition conscious. Okay, so if you're in a competitive market for those students, you want to keep your price down as much as possible. So we cut 20% of our administrative costs over a 5-year period at NYU, and we are able to put that money into financial aid.
How do our college graduates, Gene, stack up against college graduates in other countries? I keep hearing how, if Germans do better, or
it really depends.
Swiss do better. How do we know?
It depends on the field that you are trying to enter, because those rankings are kind of all across the board. But can I just jump back to something that you said a moment ago? When it comes to that student debt, the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that students need to be smart, A, about borrowing, but B, about repayment. And we see an awful lot of people who don't exhaust their eligibility to take out federal loans at lower rates because they're not educated, because they don't know, because we don't talk to them about these things.
Because the FAFSA form has 105 questions on it.
Yes, absolutely. And when they're paying it back, if they have those federal loans, there are a number of different repayment plans, and we don't see them taking advantage of them to the degree that they could. There is at least some relief out there, but you gotta look for it.
And the big idea here is something that the administration has actually fostered, and that is what's called income-based or income-contingent repayment programs, where you get into the best place you can get into. You get a government loan to go to that place that enables you to go there when it's combined with the financial grants that the place will give you. And then your repayments on your loans are never more than 10% of your discretionary income above a certain basic.
So you pay back based on your income and not necessarily how much you took out. It may take you longer to pay back, but if your first job out of college isn't the greatest, then you're not stuck with high student loan.
Is a student loan easy to get?
Very.
Yes.
Very.
Yes. There's no credit check on government loans.
Banks do this or the government?
The government now does it. It used to be that banks would give the loans and the government would subsidize the banks.
Can NYU can it say to the community, the $50,000 you spend, we can prove that that's worth it?
I think it's beyond dispute that a college education of the quality you get
Like
at
what
NYU.
does the average graduate earn?
Well, it depends on the field. That's a very important thing. But the key thing here is choice. A student that goes to the Tisch School of the Arts is making a certain choice. A student that goes to our engineering school is making a different choice. So at our engineering school, where 40% of the students come in from families that are below the poverty line, and the starting salary after graduation is $65,000, we're tripling the family income, if that's the choice. On the other hand, if a kid that comes in and wants to be a street performer, then that's a different choice. The key thing is that it be an informed choice, just the way we do in other areas. You see, there's the fungibility fallacy, I call it, where we pretend all BA degrees are the same. We're all agreeing they're not. And in every other field, we don't expect a Mercedes to cost the same as a Ford. You got to keep your eye on the quality, value, and then you make a choice.
Are we a well-educated country?
I think we could be much better educated.
It's a broad question.
Our results on national tests are pretty mediocre, and what we do is, just like in healthcare, our greatest are the greatest in the world, and our average is pretty bad. And our ability to provide true openness, true meritocracy, an educational opportunity to everyone who deserves it in this country is severely compromised by the fact that our system is so expensive to get into. I mean, colleges of the best prestige and the highest quality are shamefully concentrated with the sons and daughters of the affluent. That's just a fact. There's not enough openness of opportunity to kids of all backgrounds.
Is the federal government hands-on?
Now, with President Obama, he's been very attuned to this issue of affordability and quality and trying to think more about the worst performers that we mentioned before, so some of the bottom feeders of higher education, getting them out, but then also helping people pay back their loans and trying to restore America to being first in the world with the proportion of college graduates.
When we come back, our guests will take your questions. We'll be right back. We're back with our distinguished panel with a great discussion. We hope to do a lot more on this. We have some social media questions that came in, the world of social media. Justin Hare on Facebook. What's the biggest myth about a college education in America?
I'd say the biggest myth is that every college and every degree is the exact same. I think we've ingrained this message that you go to college, but not quite fine-tuned it enough. And I feel like especially for low-income and first-generation college students, that it's very similar to what we were telling people about buying homes. Buy a home, any home, no matter what home, no matter what the price. And we've got to be more nuanced about that.
Ashley Miller on Instagram. President Sexton, what are your thoughts on President Obama's efforts to lessen the financial burden of college?
I think any efforts in that direction are extremely important. The greatest social service program this country has ever done, we did because we were fearful that 50 million GIs were coming home from World War II and we'd have unemployment. So we sent them to college. And for 50 years, we've run on that broad democratization. But then higher education was a public good. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gotten a New York State Regents Scholarship. Okay? Today, starting about 30 years ago with Ronald Reagan, we changed it to a private good, and we started saying, you're benefiting, you borrow. We got to get away from that. I favor income-based contingent payments.
Erica Ho on Facebook. How closely should we pay attention to college rankings in magazines like Forbes and U.S. News and World Report? Are they accurate?
I read about this at NPR, and they all have major flaws. Colleges only share certain amounts of information, and we judge them based on limited information. Going back to a concept that John mentioned, the right college is the right college for you. And in the first place, we need to get colleges to report much better information about what happens to their students, what happens after they graduate, and where that tuition money goes. And then once we've reported it, we need to make decisions based on the program that you choose.
At Zaoi on Twitter, should K-12 teachers still advertise the traditional four-year education the way they have in the past? Jean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you've heard from all of us that as long as you find that right fit and as long as you find a college that is, in some regards, a good value for you, preferably because they really want you, going is a no-brainer.
I disagree with that. I don't think there's a single path. I think that there are kids who will do better outside the traditional four-year degree, particularly if they have a very particular passion.
But that's where good guidance would come in to make the match. I think that's all that you were saying, is make the match with the right place. And for some, like my uncles, it's not going to college.
Ken Dawson on Facebook. I'm about to enter college. Are liberal arts degrees worth it, or should I focus more on a specific professional study?
I'm Jesuit educated. For the right person, and you have to know that you're getting a preparation for a life, not for a particular job. There's nothing like a liberal arts education to start the platform of your development as a human being. But it's got to be for the right person.
And it has to be what you like, so it shouldn't be what you think is going to get, hitting a job and doing well is also dependent on how much you have a passion for it.
John Crabtree on Facebook. What's your advice for the middle-class American who has gotten into the more expensive, more prestigious school versus the less expensive, less prestigious school?
Less prestigious is such a tough thing to say, and sometimes I think we equate more a costly education with a better education, and that's not always the case.
Absolutely not the case. And if those less prestigious schools are often the ones that are willing to give you a substantial amount of money in scholarships and grants.
But you shouldn't be brought down by that.
Right.
A lot of our very talented minority kids are brought down by those scholarships, and they do less well when they're there because there's less stimulation.
Joe Meekum on Facebook. Are employers still actively seeking students with a four-year degree, or does a degree carry less clout in today's job market?
I think we're in a competitive situation where for employers a degree is necessary but not sufficient. You see many, many more occupations where a college degree is not the norm for people in that job, and yet people are advertising that you need a college degree to get into that job. So unfortunately, the answer is you need that college degree, but it may not be enough.
It gets you in the door. The jobs that came back after the recession were much more for people that had college degrees.
Meekum also asks, is there a closing gap between what many label a good school and a bad school?
I think that as we get more information, there's a lot more information about the overlooked gems and the stinkers sitting out there in plain view, to be honest. I mean, there's plenty of colleges that are doing a great job educating people, that are affordable, that work well with students of all different backgrounds. And there are also other colleges out there with terrible graduation rates that once you get in the door, your chances of doing well.
We're out of time. In general, on this topic, optimistic or pessimistic?
Optimistic.
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 Big thanks to, okay. A big thanks to my guests, Zakiah Smith, Anna Kamenet, Gene Chatsky, and President John Sexton of NYU. You can always find me on Twitter at King's Things. I'll see you next time.